Live from the UK, broadcasting around the world. You're listening to Talking Minaret, discussing matters that affect you, streaming to the world and beyond.
Welcome to Talking Minaret, the weekly podcast discussing the Ummah and the issues affecting you. My name is Ibad. Today I'm joined by brother Shaz. He is a business owner who is involved with regular Ummah engagement activities. Shaz, it's great to have you here.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It would be nice to see you face to face, but we're in quarantine because of the COVID outbreak. How you holding up? You weirded out yet?
Alhamdulillah. Quarantine, I don't know, I have doubts over what you class as quarantine and what is a quarantine, the definition of a quarantine. So, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
But Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
It's fine.
I know several people have actually got it, including myself. Unfortunately, my Nana Bay passed away. May Allah grant him Jannah. Ameen.
Ameen. Ameen.
I'm hoping that it's just going to brush over and they'll find a cure or vaccine, but I heard you had a few thoughts about this vaccine program. Trump's touting the whole hydrochloroquine. Some Muslims are linking it to black seed. There's too many theories out there.
There is. I mean, the hydrochloroquine one, only yesterday, they released a study saying that there was an increased death rate of people who were taking hydrochloroquine. So there's been, in that small study, 22% increase of people dying of prescribing hydrochloroquine. The thing is, here's the problem. People are taking these drugs and saying, here's a wonder drug, here's a fantastic drug, this is this drug. Each drug is different for different people. Hydrochloroquine, it's a drug that, you can take, but there's so many other side effects from it. There are elements of that particular drug where studies have shown that you need to have a liver test done for it. You have a blood test done every 12 weeks. Anyone who's been on types of drugs like chemotherapy treatment and things like this, they'll know that you have regular blood tests, and those blood tests, they'll see what's going on within your particular blood work for that particular drug to take effect. So people who are touting hydrochloroquine or prescribing hydrochloroquine to other people, they need to be a bit careful about what they're actually doing, because there's no proof of that particular drug. It was just a statement made, or one study globally that was done, and certain results came out. But now the more detailed study at the moment has shown actually hydrochloroquine has no effect on COVID, and in fact it showed an increased death rate once people had been treated by it. So I like I said, I was dubious about this particular drug in the first place. When people say it's a wonder drug, is guaranteed to work, etc. But you found a lot of people actually, mistakenly, even within the Ummah, people prescribing it and saying, it works, when there's no proof of it. There's no proof of it showing it that it works. And drugs have different effects on different people, based on the fact that we have different types of blood groups, different ailments, how it affects different parts of our organs. This is known in pharmacology.
Those people who link it to black seed, and there are hadith in relation to the benefits of black seed.
Yeah, but there's no doubt. No one, and the worst thing is, nobody questions this, because the hadith says, Rasulullah said that there's a cure for everything except death. Yeah. So we know, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us aql to go and in pursuit of knowledge and finding the answers for those illnesses, and that's accepted. For people to say that they've done enough research within the Ummah, scientific research from black seed to create a vaccine, then bro, this would be a cure for everything. Just like you have a cure for a headache, you take a paracetamol or ibuprofen or whatever, and the headache goes away. In 95% of people, in some people it doesn't go away. So if we've got that level of treatment from black seed, then alhamdulillah, then it's not a problem. But to turn around and say that they've got a cure for it, and no one's disputing that there's qualities not just in black seed, even Rasulullah said for certain things you drink milk and honey and black seed and other things and Zamzam water. There's plenty, but I'm saying there's just definitively say there's the cure in that and that will fix it. Then people need to bring the evidence or proof.
I suppose the real problem is in relation to those elderly of our ummah who would be immunocompromised. I suppose, but to be fair, the UK government specifically isn't really bothered about them, because even Boris Johnson said that 60% of the population, UK population, would contract the virus, and many more families are going to lose those loved ones. Sir Patrick Balance, the UK's chief scientific advisor, he said to avoid a second peak in winter, we would need to achieve a herd immunity, and that's achieved via usually vaccination, or in this case, they want to achieve it via probably infecting 60%, where the healthy people would develop immunity. And I suppose those infected who are elderly, they'll just die off. So it just goes to show that they don't really care about the population, because in relation to economic value, the elderly don't hold any economic value to society. It's an ill of capitalism and the society in itself. What do you think?
This isn't a new thing or a new phenomenon. What you're saying about those particular the thought process behind the elderly. If you go to any hospital and a doctor will turn around and make a judgment call on whether or not a very, very, very expensive cancer drug should be used on the elderly patient who's got a lower chance of survival than on a person who's in their 30s, shall we say, they will say, don't worry about the elderly, give it to the younger person. So this is the way that they've always viewed it for a very long time.
Yeah.
So this notion of saying that that this is a new phenomenon, that they don't care about the elderly, my brother, this has existed for a while.
Exactly.
And the older you get and the weaker you become, then they have this already built into their systems, into their healthcare systems. That it's a waste of that money, even trying to give it to this particular person, because better to use that on a younger person because it's got a better chance. This is not the way that we view it in Islam, but obviously in capitalist societies they do.
There was a quote that I saw recently from the World Health Organization Director General Tedros something. I can't even say his last name, but he did mention that if anything is going to hurt the world, it is moral decay, and that not taking the death of the elderly or senior citizens as serious is an issue of moral decay. Was watching something on the news the other day in relation to Sweden, the European country. It's not even in lockdown. Quoting that, because just touching on your economic point of view that you mentioned in relation to capitalism, Sweden's not even in lockdown because it would be too detrimental to society and to the economy.
Yeah, but now they're saying that, but their death rate figures are increasing because of that. But what you see is they focus on those countries. They focus on those countries where the death rates are high. Why aren't they focusing on those countries where the death rates are really low? If you look at all the countries in Africa as a continent as a whole, is 1.2 billion. The number of deaths is nowhere near in comparison to thingy. And to say that they're on lockdown, there's images of them not being in lockdown per se. Yeah, they're doing social distancing, and I completely agree with that. There's no harm, there's no ill in practicing that particular methodology.
It's quite obvious the fact that the elderly, especially in these capitalist societies, are economically they're expendable.
You know, it was noted that Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he once saw people who were beggars, non-Muslim, but they were citizens of the state. Citizens of the state, and they were non-Muslim, bro. So this is where the difference between Islam and those societies and systems which are non-Islamic view, and here's the difference. When he saw them and he realized that they were citizens of the state, he instructed the people from the Bayt al-Mal to give them a pension. These were elderly. So he instructed them for them to give them a pension that they shouldn't have to beg. He didn't think of them as they're elderly. That this, he looked at them the point that when they were young, they helped because obviously they gave jizya, so they helped the state. So we shouldn't just toss them to the wayside and view it as the people do. Oh, look, it's a bunch of pensioners and this and that. It's like it's almost seen as an insult and a slur in Western society, that the way that you should look at the elderly instead of holding them in honor and esteem. But you know what? You do the other way around here in Western societies, where you just toss them on the wayside because, as far as they're concerned, they add no economic value to being productive. This is how they call productive members of society. They can say what it is, but this is their terminologies. They're productive members of society.
In the official figures initially,
Yeah.
they didn't even report the elderly dying in care homes. Those were just NHS staff dying, NHS people in hospitals dying. It wasn't even the care home people dying, which I find quite interesting. You probably add another 3,000 to the actual stats.
No, they're saying it's more than that, to be honest with you. And like I said, there's stats. There's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics, as they call it. But, even then, like, I mean, I'm dubious about the figures, I had a friend of mine in Birmingham. His father passed away. However, what he claimed was, he said, look, my father didn't die of COVID. My father did not die of COVID. However, what they said to him is, if you want your father's body and you want it now, you better sign the certificate and say it was COVID. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks and for an autopsy and get it then. So how many Muslims have turned around and said, you know what, we're not bothered about what it is. We want the body and we want to bury our loved one. I'm not saying it wasn't, or this didn't, or they didn't have underlying health complications. SubhanAllah, his father was like, 80s. So, he said, look, my father had been old. He'd had strokes in the last few years. So I'm not saying that this virus doesn't attack the vulnerable, the most vulnerable in our society. However, there are a vast number of these deaths, which some people are saying, look, they're nothing to do with that. And I don't blame certain doctors or health authorities because they're so backlogged with them. As far as they're concerned, it's easier to say it's COVID now and then worry about that later on, whether it was or it wasn't. So it just shows you that there's figures can be masked and milked and massaged to the way that the tune is, or to the way that the media wants to play it. Like I said at the beginning of it, hydrochloroquine was a wonder drug. It was a game changer. Trump was calling it a game changer. This is it. And there were so many people advocating it that, this is a wonder drug. It's gonna, it's amazing. But the truth of it is, not enough research was done, because not even a 1 year cycle of this particular virus has gone round to know exactly what it is. Like you said, it may dissipate, it may go away, it may increase. Allahu Alam, we don't know. But to turn around and say this is the magical drug and it cures everything, again, the smallest or the biggest study to date so far shows that it wasn't. And then now he's gone quiet on it. Now it's not a wonder drug. Now it's seen as something else. So I think a lot of it is being manipulated. There's a lot of the media narrative is one angle. There's so many different hypotheses or so many different theories people are coming up with.
Did you hear about that independent article? The fact there was a confirmed case for Detrick, the United States Biological Warfare Lab, is where the coronavirus originated. And there was some kind of cease and desist order because of violation of health and safety, because the leaks were found there.
Look, biological warfare is not something which is new. In the World War, when they created the use of mustard gas, that was something new. It was a time of that was the methodology they used. The phosphorus bombs that they used in Iraq to completely destroy and annihilate the Muslims there. These aren't new weapons or new elements that they've not designed or created or tampered or played around with. The NIH in America, which is the National Institute of Health, it's been working on coronaviruses for the last 7 to 8 years for viruses and vaccines. So obviously they do look at the effect that these viruses have on human populations. So to turn around and say that that it wasn't from Fort Detrick, or it wasn't, or these are just theory. We know that we know that Western countries do research on a biological level. So why can't it have been that? That's what the argument is. Why, just like they turn around and say, oh no, it's nothing to do with that. A lot of brothers out there saying, oh no, there's no proof of this. But they do use chemical weapons. Have they not used chemical weapons on Muslims in the past? They're calling them chemical weapons, but have they not used these weapons? They've used them as a weaponized on the on society and on people. Nerve gases, agents, all sorts of these stuff.
A recent report from The Nation reporting that the Pentagon was aware of the likelihood of a pandemic of a novel coronavirus, and that was from an internal document back in 2017. So it just goes to show the fact that they're probably aware of this.
In 2015, the footage archive is available online, and it's on CNN, where President Barack Obama already addressed exactly what you said, and this was in 2015, 5 years ago, that a more deadlier strain of the SARS and MERS virus could be potentially unleashed in the next 3 to 5 years on a global scale, and we won't be able to do with it. That is so damning statement to make. And like I said, I have footage of that recorded. I've seen footage of that. It's not hidden. It's available. And at the time, it was like this was part and parcel of like the Obama healthcare program, that he was trying to link it into that. Say, look, we need the healthcare program because we don't want this kind of pandemic on a global scale. Because about Obamacare, and obviously one of the first things that Trump came and got rid of was the Obamacare. So now, obviously, the Democrats are using that as a method. Say, look, see, Obamacare would have been able to take care of a lot of these problems. Blah blah blah. Fine, they want to use it for whatever their political maneuvering is. But to turn around and say that these coronaviruses are something, this one's brand new. This particular strain of it is obviously, like I said, came about in 2019. But the general concept of coronaviruses, Ebola, SARS, MERS, they've been around for a while now. So they don't just sit around. They do study them at the end of the day. They've been looking into them. They have teams, effective teams looking at them, what kind of effects they have. You'd think that countries or people claiming that they're advanced countries and they're the most scientifically advanced countries, are you honestly telling me that they've not looked at the effect that these have, and they have their modeling data in place, the effect that these have on people at a local level and a global scale?
There was this recent article that I read in relation to, from the other angle, from the other side. Chinese government's spokesman are blaming the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman for China blamed the United States. They said the fact that it might have been the US that brought the epidemic to Wuhan from their biological labs or whatever in America during they had military games there.
Yeah. I did read something about that. There was a military
So
game.
the Chinese are trying to blame America on the other side.
Yeah, but isn't that just political maneuvering from? You're gonna get propaganda, isn't it? It's like Hitler during the war. He wasn't a question of whether his people thought he was right or wrong. The propaganda fit in with the narrative, because this is look at the hypocrisy of this. Yeah, there were more attacks, more anti-Semitic attacks in France the previous year before Hitler had come to power. So the anti-Semitism didn't rise or occur or start off in Germany. It started off more in France, and that's historical proof of that. And then obviously then it shifted towards Germany, because Germany took it to a state level where they were accused of doing these things. But it was the West who had their own propaganda that Hitler was a terrible man and he was killing this, etc. Even though, I think that's a separate podcast that you want to talk about, etc. The things like the Holocaust. But, to turn around and say that, it is guaranteed the Americans took it to China, or Chinese did it on purpose, and this is the Chinese agenda, etc. Fair enough. I'm not saying that it isn't, but we probably need to have a bit more proof, factual proof, and see how this plays out. And that's another thing as well. People keep making up, saying, "Yeah, this is what it is, guaranteed this, and this is the guaranteed cure, and whatever." You've got to let this play out. A lot of thinkers out there have turned around and said, or political scientists have turned around and said, "You're not going to know the full effects of this in terms of globalization and the political ramifications and the health ramifications until another 3 or 4 years time."
Yeah.
So you can't turn around and say this is. You can only talk about the here and now, but you can't turn around and say, yeah, what it definitively is what's going to occur until 2-3 years time.
Okay, now tell me something. I've got another question on this. Why aren't people focusing on the conspiracy theories and all that aside? Why aren't people focusing on the fact that the capitalist cut, the Tory cut on free health on the NHS, for those listening globally, the nation's wealth healthcare within the UK, the cut on them, because possibly that the NHS doesn't belong in the capitalist state, because it was created in 1948, proposed by a socialist competitor to state healthcare provided by communist Soviet Union. So the NHS doesn't actually belong in a capitalist society, hence the cuts. The UK have been better prepared if those cuts didn't occur. And shouldn't we be looking at this on a societal level, i.e. the fact that the society ideologically isn't geared towards taking care of the interests of the people?
It's always about benefit, what benefits them, etc. So we've already touched on that kind of thing, but in terms of what else you mentioned about the cuts and the financial element of it, I personally think, to be honest with you, I don't think it would have made that much of a massive difference, considering what people are saying. Like, in general, what I find odd is that there's hotspots, without a doubt. In the UK, there's hotspots, like London's a hotspot. Some parts of the Midlands are hotspots. So I agree with that. There seems to be certain hotspots that are taking place. What I don't get is that there's that many hospitals in the country. There's approximately private and public hospitals. There's about 1,200 in the UK. In the UK, yeah, I'd love to see these figures when they come out. That they're building all these big hospitals with 4,000 beds, and whether or not any of them are going to get used. It's like the one in America when they got this military hospital, floating ship got sent to New York. By the time it got to New York, they didn't even use it. And Governor Cuomo was crying, "Oh, we need it. We need beds. We need beds. We need beds." And then obviously this became a diplomatic spat between the Republicans and the Democrats, saying, "Look, we sent you this ship. You didn't even use it. It could have got sent somewhere else, so we could have used it somewhere else, etc." So like I said, I'd love to see all the true figures when they come out, because again, I have my own theories and my own numbers and my own stats. Even though people will blast them and say, "Oh no, that isn't the case. You can't really look at it." But I say you can look at them, and you can look at them in a wider context. What about the figures of people who are dying globally because of hunger, famine? How come those aren't addressed? The moment it becomes real and something affects you on your doorstep, then it's we need to panic, we need to act, we need to do something. What about what's going on to the rest of the members of the Muslim Ummah who can't even, you're calling this a lockdown. SubhanAllah, this isn't a lockdown, my brother. This isn't a quarantine. You're going out and about. Those who need to work, who can't work from home, are allowed to go to work. You can go to the park. You can go and get fresh air. You can go to the town to go and get your food. Go and ask the people of Kashmir what a lockdown means. Go and ask the people of Palestine what a lockdown means. And the mothers and brothers and sisters of Syria what a lockdown is. This is nothing. This isn't a quarantine or lockdown. So those people who have this this ability to complain and moan about it, then they need to reflect on themselves. I think they're the ones who've probably been affected most by capitalism, or those the ones who live a cushy lifestyle too much and thinking this is hard. This is not hard, brother. This is very, very, very easy, because they haven't made it that hard, to be honest with you.
Final point. Where do you think this is heading in relation to we can see there's an article that I read in relation to the Chinese funding so much on surveillance, and there's those protests that are happening in America in which they protest against their freedoms being, stricken and being being imprisoned in home or whatever it is. Over exaggerating a bit there. Where do you think this is heading globally in terms of the geopolitics of things? Are we going to see China being isolated completely now? There are those actually that are saying the fact that this was a plan by America to isolate the economic powerhouse of China.
I can't see that happening, to be honest with you. Because the thing is with China is it's ingrained in so many different areas now that had this been like, say, 20 years ago or 15, 20, then I would have probably agreed and said, right, you know what, they've done that to stop them. But because its economy is so strong now and it's ingrained in so many different countries, and China has political alliances with so many different countries, I would find that hard to believe that it's done for that. In terms of what you can do with it, remember when it comes to political maneuvering or political strategy, that can change. So now the way I would look at it is what's going to happen next. They're already talking about world vaccination programs. Everyone should be. This has been the forefront of people like the Gates Foundation, Soros Foundation, Zuckerberg Chan Foundation. They're all of this nature. Now, one of the arguments I look at is, how can I trust a vaccine that's just been on the market for 6 months and I don't know any of the side effects? Normally, they'll say it takes them 5 to 10 years to produce a vaccine. To go through all those rigorous tests in order to see what would happen. So, is it safe to take that vaccine in the first and foremost? Just because a doctor turns around and says to me, "Yeah, a vaccine's here." That doesn't make sense to me at the end of the day to say that without having the full data, the full knowledge to say, you know what, here's the side effects of this particular vaccine. However, it will eradicate this problem, but you may have to suffer from this. I mean, is that good for society? What about if one of these vaccines has other adverse effects in the future, in terms of maybe to do with population control or people not being able to have children or children born with deformities? You don't know. I mean, the Gates Foundation was kicked out of China because one of the sub organizations it was using, it was doing some sort of vaccinations, and it led to deaths in that particular region. So they were kicked out of China for that reason. So these kind of things don't make headline news because it goes against the political grain, or it goes against the West's own ideology or own thinking. However, in terms of surveillance, that's a big one that you touched on. They're already talking about, people's phones should be able, just for this period, they should be monitored so Google can see how people are interacting, and then those with the virus, etc. Isn't that an intrusion of people's civil liberties? Is what civil liberty groups are actually saying out there. So there's a whole host of things, how it plays out, what they can use, how can they use it in their benefit. I mean, you can't even touch on it. Look at the economy. What's happened to certain countries? They're on the, you can see them collapsing. Saudis, they can't give their oil away for free.
Yeah, I'm glad that you even touched on the vaccine point of view. I'm already getting messages from brothers on how to, especially in this country, evade the vaccine, because, as you mentioned, a vaccine isn't made within a couple of months, which is what they're trying to do right now. It goes through rigorous testing at the least, but they're just going to try and rush this thing through. And I can't imagine years down the line, I can imagine they find out it causes birth defects or whatever it might be. But, what can we do? We just advised the alhamdulillah, from the other perspective, Muslims now are coming out with prophetic hadith in relation to how to deal with plague. They're looking at Islam from the angle, not just spiritual deen that you can find to your household and you can find to the masjid, but how to apply the deen to the rest of like the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. keeping a spear's
Subhanallah.
distance, 2
Yeah.
meters distance between yourself. So, I mean, like, Alhamdulillah, Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا كَرُوا وَمَا كَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. He's the best of all planners. So, we'll see how this pans out. Some really good, interesting points that we've had on this discussion. We'll keep it short there, but we'll be doing this weekly, different guests. We'll try and bring up more interesting topics. But for now, Assalamu alaikum.